All right, hi everybody. Welcome to another LTAD chat. I'm Rick Howard here along with Dr. Tony Marino, and we're excited that today our guest is Kate Nematollahi from NAYS. So what does that stand for? We're going to let her explain that to you and give us all a little bit of a background on how she got involved in sports, and then that leading up to how she connected with NAYS. Go ahead, Kate. Good morning.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep.
Hi, Rick. Hi, Tony. I should call you by your doctor names, but we've met a few times in person now, so I feel like we're friends, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me onto your LTAD chat. And the first time that I met you all was at one of the LTAD meetups. You have to tell me the name of the conference again, but I was thoroughly impressed by your group, and I'm just a sponge for all things LTAD. So I really appreciate you inviting me as part of the LTAD chat. And again, my name is Kate Nematollahi. I'm the Director of Education Programs for the National Alliance for Youth Sport. So NAYS is a nonprofit. We are a membership organization. We started in 1981, so we're celebrating our 40th year this summer. We were founded as the National Youth Sports Coaches Association. We just had one program. Our founder wanted to address the issues that were happening in sports. Even in the 70s, some of the issues that we experience in youth sports were starting to rear their heads or were existing. He, at the time, his name is Fred Eng. He worked for the Sporting Goods Manufacturers Association, which is now SFIA. They got together a big group of all sorts of key players in the sports industry to talk about what is ailing youth sports. It was already coaches taking things too seriously. There were issues with safety. Coaches were not educated in how to coach kids, the rules of the sport. And they were seeing that was having an effect on kids, their enjoyment of the game, and they needed to keep it fun. So the solution that we were founded on was to educate and support youth sports coaches. And the idea that a youth sports coach needs to be trained and have at least some standard level of education. Thankfully, that idea has really caught on. There's several other coach training organizations. All of the national governing bodies have their own coach education department geared towards the youth level. But at the time, there was really only us and Human Kinetics doing this in the late 70s, early 80s. So from there, we've come a long way. We have programs not just for coaches, but for parents, officials, volunteer league directors, professional youth sports administrators, really any adult who is involved in youth sports. We have resources, training courses, membership benefits to support you. Yeah, so that's kind of a background about NAYS. We have trained more than 4 million adults since we started. And right now we have about 13 employees. We're based in West Palm Beach, Florida, which is where all of our staff works out of. And I've been with NAYS for 11 years, going on 12 years now. I love this job. I'll just keep talking until you guys interrupt me. Okay. But it's kind of an interesting story. I mean, I guess people always wonder, like, oh, how did you get to be in this position? And growing up, I was always involved in sports. I was the youth sports kid, the Parks and Rec kid. We actually lived across the street from the big rec center in our town. And that was kind of like our after school program. Like, I just go to the park and play. And my parents signed me up for everything. I mean, I was doing the 5-year-old soccer. I was on a swim team at 6. I had played basketball since 5. So I got involved at a really early age, but thankfully all of my coaches were great. I mean, I can only name a handful of coaches who gave me a poor experience, and I can still remember my experience. I mean, you never forget the coaches that are just jerks, right? But I've kind of dabbled in everything. I call it sport ADD. Like, all right, yeah, I'm kind of done with soccer now. I don't want to do that anymore. And I played softball. In high school, I played volleyball, basketball. I was on the track team. I should say I was on the throwing team. I didn't do any of the running events. I threw discus, which is really fun. I haven't done that in a while. I wonder what it would be like if I picked up a discus, tried to chuck it.
That'll be the next chat.
But at the time, I was sixth in the state of Maryland. I mean, for
Oh,
whatever that means. But just to say that I've always been involved with sports. I mean, competitively for some sports, but recreationally for others. Club volleyball, AAU basketball, and then by the time I got to college, I wasn't really on par to play that competitively at any school at a Division I level, but I wanted to go to a Division I sports school because I wanted to be a football fan pretty much. I wanted to go to a big school and have that environment. So I went to Clemson University. I studied marketing at Clemson, Spanish and international business. And while I was there, I was on the club lacrosse team. So you may realize that I didn't mention lacrosse as any of the sports that I played when I was younger, because I didn't ever play on a team until I tried out for the club team, which is anyone can make it pretty much on the club team, which is nice. But I feel like the skills that I learned from playing all those different sports throughout my life, and I knew how to throw and catch with a lacrosse stick because I grew up in Maryland, and kind of everyone does. Your neighborhood friends do. You learn it in phys ed. So I was a lot more skilled at lacrosse than some of the girls from South Carolina at the time, even though I hadn't played, and I had a lot of fun just playing with the team. I mean, I think once you're on a team and you like being on a team, you're motivated by it, you're fun, those are your friends. It was a way for me to make friends in a place where I didn't really know anyone. And in addition to the club lacrosse, I also played a lot of intramural sports. I mean, sports playing for the first time. So I'm a big advocate of lifelong sports, lifelong activity. As I learn more about the LTAD principles, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And a lot of things that were happening behind the scenes that you don't even realize are happening, but we're all setting me up to be active for life. And I also feel like since I have a background playing different sports, I'm more willing to pick up a new sport for the first time now. So my husband's really into golf, and I've been playing golf for maybe 10 years now. I started playing tennis, which still feels a little funny to do a backhand, but I'm determined to learn. I know I can learn a new sports skill, and there's ways to do that. And it's just fun, like being able to pick up a new game, play paddle ball at the beach, whatever it is. I'm a student of LTAD. I'm a sponge when it comes to talking with you guys and following along with the LTAD chats that you've put out. And so again, that's a little background about me, a little bit into NAYS, but I'm sure we'll talk about NAYS a little bit more.
When did
Wow.
you realize that you were the poster child for LTAD?
I'm sure you guys are too. Yeah.
Well, you've truly lived the physically literate experience, the perpetual journey for you. I guess you're going to squeeze pickleball in there somewhere, in all of these activities. You really had a for lack of a better word, fun time these years being one of those kids, those neighborhood kids that goes out and plays the park, participating in high school sport, college, and then now as an adult and then as an administrator, your association with NAYS in coach education is really embodies that physically literate journey that the LTAD framework speaks to, that participation path that you've taken, but also as a competitor and in high school and some degree college. And I appreciate your participation at our LTAD summit, our inaugural LTAD summit to try to help launch many of the initiatives that we've been trying to push forward as we know youth sport, its special place in our culture. What maybe, and we're obviously in the, in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm sure it's kind of impacted some of the things you do in terms of coach education, your organization. But as an administrator and coach educator, what do you feel are maybe perhaps those 2 or 3 important asks or issues this year as it relates to youth sport? What are some things that you see that have affected you in your position or your organization as being really big issues as it relates to youth sport?
With specific regard to the pandemic, you mean?
Well, it could be. We're in the middle of a pandemic year,
Yeah.
but and you talked about some of the things that your organization addressed, but as you see it right now in March 2021, what are some really a couple maybe of big issues in youth sport that you feel we need to kind of focus on or address?
Yeah, well, I was mentioning how the idea that a youth sports coach should be trained, should be educated, has started to catch on. However, not everyone is really on board with that. Our biggest competition, and if you say, we offer a coach training program for the volunteer recreational coach, who's your competition? Of course, there's other coach training providers, but our biggest competition is the leagues who feel like they don't need to train their coaches, that's something that's optional. And when budgets are cut, it seems to be one of the first things that they decide that they don't need to pay for. And that's a struggle for us, but to me, that's affecting the quality of the program immensely. The administrator level, someone who works for the Parks and Recreation Department, they're the youth league president, that person really needs to believe in the value of educating coaches. If that is something that they feel is optional, it has a huge effect on the league. But I will say, I mean, we've worked with many organizations for years and years, and they get it. It's just part of the process. They get a new coach, they register them for their NAYS training. However, we've just seen that programs aren't able to run. I mean, there's some certain states that haven't been able to do indoor sports or any youth sports at all. And of course that affects us because we're a membership organization. We have a per coach fee for the training and the membership benefits. And if somebody is not getting trained and they don't need a coach's membership, then that affects us. However, we're still here. We're still creating training courses. We're still maintaining our membership benefits and all of that. It's just that the number of coaches we were able to reach in this past year was less than typical, and it's to be expected. I mean, there's only a few industries like Amazon who haven't been affected by, I mean, you guys are in higher ed, that's been affected by the pandemic. It's a reality. And I think for us, thankfully, we were already set up for the online trainings. We already had a majority of coaches going through our courses online. So for some, it was just getting the organizations used to the online training versus they were doing in-person trainings in the past. All of our trainings are video based. So we've produced the videos. We work with professionals and youth sports experts to compile the video content. We work with professional coaches, collegiate level coaches, and they're all sharing their insight and advice for youth sports coaches, the rec coach, the parent volunteer, or the community volunteer. And we have been able to put that as an online course and we've had the online course for a while now. So that thankfully has allowed us to maintain educating coaches in the same way since before the pandemic. But to me, the real people hurting right now are the kids who don't have access to play in their community, whether it's that the programs aren't there or that, some parents aren't comfortable with their kids doing things. Everybody has their own personal comfort level with social interactions during the pandemic. So we know that kids aren't playing enough and they're not getting all the benefits through sport right now. And that's the downside, right?
Yeah, hopefully things will start to open up here as we get that vaccine out there and people get more comfortable and the weather is going to start to get warmer and people can be outdoors more often, at least in my part of the country. And, you spoke of, earlier certain issues in youth sport in your introduction. You talked about sports specialization, youth sport burnout, the decline in participation in youth sport. And, this coach education piece, which is so critical. It kind of baffles me that people don't see that the solution to many of these issues that you spoke of can be addressed with quality coach education. And I know you've done your homework on long-term athletic development, and we know that many national sport governing bodies have their version of an athletic development model. Yet coaches still don't know, most coaches, whether they be volunteer coaches or high school coaches or whatever it might be, most of them are still not familiar with the LTAD or the ADM framework. And that seems to be a barrier. And how do we, in your position, using LTAD as a framework, how do we get through that barrier? What are some tips or insight or thoughts you might have, and how do we get through that barrier of getting this framework of LTAD into the hands of community recreation directors and volunteer youth sport coaches and parents?
Mm-hmm. You hit on it with the community recreation director. I mean, if you think about a parent getting involved with sports for the first time, we can't put the onus on that parent. A lot of parents have assumptions about the quality of the program, the quality of the coaching. I mean, if you tell a parent, this volunteer coach has no experience whatsoever, they've never been through a training course. I mean, sometimes their jaws will be on the floor. Like, are you kidding? I just paid and signed my kid up for this program, and the coach really doesn't have any experience or education, or they're just another mom that basically could have been me standing out there. It's like when they drop their kids off at school, they have this assumption, which is correct, that at least their teacher has had some kind of training or education. But in youth sports, there's the assumption that the education and the quality is part of the program, but it's not. There's nothing there to back that up. There's no standard level of quality for coaches or for youth sports programs. It's up to that local community, whoever's running that youth sports organization, to set the standard. They're the ones that are going to be onboarding new coaches. So we, as an organization, National NAYS for Youth Sports, take a lot of pride in our certification for youth sports administrators course. That is a professional certification for somebody who works at the Parks and Recreation Department. They could work at a Boys and Girls Club, a private sports facility. But the idea is that you're going to be managing all of the programs. You're going to have a say in recruiting coaches, educating coaches, getting information out to parents. That's the person who's coordinating the whole league. Then let's make sure that this individual has that background, has all of that information. We require professional education. Once you earn the CYSA credential, you have to submit for continuing education. So some of those courses are things that we've put together, like the two of you were able to present at our recent conference for youth sports administrators last year, the NAYS Youth Sports Congress. So the hundreds, there was at least a few hundred that were in your session that were learning about LTAD and principles that they can incorporate into their program. Maybe I need to set certain limitations on the length of my program, the days that they practice, or make certain emphasis in my parent communication about this is the way our program is run and this is why. So educating that professional, that youth sports administrator, is really key. There's no way to reach every youth sports parent. There's a new youth sports parent every day. There's new volunteer coaches all the time. They're coming to sports with their own experiences, whether they've actually played sports or not. They have opinions about what sports are like. Some people are passionate sports fans. They have that college team, that pro team that they love. And when they go to games or they watch games with their friends, everybody's acting a fool and yelling, and, they have this super fan mentality. And then now they're registering their 5-year-old for flag football. Their 5-year-old's given a Broncos jersey or whatever team that they like. And now I'm going to cheer for that football player the same way They're like, oh, whoa, this isn't, we do things a little bit differently. To me, the LTAD framework, like continuing your mission to push this information out and make sure everybody involved with sports has this background knowledge, is key. And it makes sense because you're not saying, oh, let's just make sports fun. Like, everybody gets to play. The reason is because that is what is going to be best for the athletes, for as many athletes as possible, for as long as possible, so that this is going to be a successful human being, and whatever level of sport they make it to is, it's going to help them with that, making it as far as they can in sports, but it's also going to make sure they don't have the injuries, they don't get the burnout, that they're continuing to play at, forever, right? That's the goal. When I first started working for NAYS, our founder was still here. He's since retired. And actually, when I came on board with NAYS, I was just graduated from college. I was working at a restaurant. I was waitressing. And I knew Fred Ng, our founder, because 2 of his sons played in a band that would play 2 times a week at this restaurant in Ocean City, Maryland. And so I got to know him. He actually was running a fundraiser golf tournament in Ocean City. So the restaurant I worked for was sponsoring it. I got to be a part of the golf tournament and go and represent the restaurant as a sponsor. So I got to learn about NAYS at that time. And he had just signed a contract with an organization. So I don't know if I can name them, but anyway, you imagine an international organization that serves children. You might even remember these like infomercials where there'd be a child sitting in the dirt that didn't have shoes, and they're like, if you pay $20 a month, then this child's going to be able to have food and shoes and yada yada. So this is a well-run international organization, and they had children's centers throughout the world that they wanted to start offering sports programs. And they wanted to do it in the right way. They wanted youth development principles. They wanted it to be fun. They wanted to include as many kids as possible. They wanted a variety of sports. And they looked to us to help them with developing the curriculum for some of these programs. So he had a need for a coordinator to help manage that program. And I studied Spanish and international business. He knew I had this background in sports. And there was sort of an informal interview process, but he was like, do you want to come work for me down in Florida? And thankfully, he's a guy that goes with his gut feeling on a lot of things. So I got on a plane like 2 weeks later to come down to Florida. But he really, was really good at sitting me down, sometimes for hours at a time, and really explaining the philosophies in sports that he had, that he studied. And the whole idea that, yes, the elite level of sports matters. I mean, nobody wanted to see another Tiger Woods as much as he did. But the way to do that is to keep as many kids as possible playing sports and having fun for as long as possible. Then the talent will unveil itself. You want everybody playing. Everybody deserves a chance to play. If the kid that's going to be really good at the high school, he'll be good at high school. But if he didn't get a chance to play, he's sitting at home on the sofa because there wasn't a rec program for him out there, or the coach was a jerk and he had a bad experience and now he's going home. I mean, you never know. And that's a disservice. So to me, youth sports administrators, your coaches, your public servants, and getting them to understand the impact that they're having for kids. Yeah, they want, the kid to have a good time this season, but it's really about making sure that kid stays active for life. And there's ways, especially using the LTAD principles, that they can structure their programs, structure their practices, structure their interactions with kids to make that happen and really have an impact on how long a child's going to be active for the rest of their lives. Yeah.
Oh, great story. Sounds like it was your destiny to be a server at the restaurant in Ocean City.
Right?
Yeah, maybe that's why I didn't feel good about my life at that point, because, I graduated from college in 2009, which was around the time that the recession. So not a lot of people were hiring, and I was going back to work at the restaurant where I'd already worked for 2 summers. I thought at that point I'd be on to some management training program or whatever, something after you graduate. And the fact that I was going back to work at the restaurant, I wasn't too happy about. But I tell you, it kind of goes to show that no matter what you're doing, that if you do your job well, I mean, I was trying to be the best waitress that I could. And he even said, we had a table of 10 and you didn't write down any of our dinner order. And I said, well, I really practiced memorizing everything or whatever. So it's like, just do your best and have a good attitude no matter what you're doing. And then you'll get these opportunities. They kind of unveil themselves, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Kate, I know from our first conversations at the first LTAD playground way back when, and the subsequent, the enthusiasm that you're sharing with us here permeates everything that you do. And I think the question I'm thinking now, because it's been great information of how we reach out to all the adults who are involved in youth sports so that we make it kid-focused, adult-driven, and then using some of the best information that your organization, what Tony and I do, et cetera, come together. I think one of the neat things in the pandemic has been the increased attention to the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion with everything we do to reach out. And it seems like you have a really nice program that affects kids and adults. You're working in both realms, but mostly through the adult realm. So how do you think LTAD is a framework and what you do at NAYS work together to create that more inclusive, child-centered youth sports environment? And how do you promote that?
Well, I would say, long before I heard the word LTAD, we were meeting some of the needs that you guys are recommending, meeting some of the criteria. We actually offer a few programs. We've heard from the recreation professionals, youth sports professionals that we work with over the years, that they, for example, they have parents wanting to get kids involved at a younger and younger age, or they're wanting to specialize in things that they know are wrong, but they're needing help with educating the parents about it. So we have actually developed the curriculum and we sell the equipment for certain programs. And one example of this is our Start Smart sports development programs. And it's for kids 3, 4, and 5 to get involved with sports appropriately with developmentally appropriate equipment. The curriculum is for the parent and the child to work together. So that's one example. We also have a youth golf program, which is it was originally meant for underserved communities, but it is not limited to that. And I would say we have never specifically in our coaches training done anything about diversity. Here's a diversity training for you as a coach. Not saying that isn't to come. In our professional certification, we have had a lot of sessions about inclusion in youth sports, diversity in youth sports, whether, getting everyone involved. Don't even say what type of, young athlete that it could be, a child with disability or a child from a different background, different income, but structuring your program to include everyone has always been something that we've harped on. I wouldn't say we've done anything unique in the past year to do things differently. To me, a coach who respects everybody on the team, who includes everybody on the team, the kids are going to learn inclusion and respect for different types of people just through that. I don't know if that was your experience. For me, I have been on sports teams where, I was the only white athlete. I mean, and to me, it was never brought up. It was never, we are an inclusive team. It was just, we're a team. We're doing this together. And, I guess sports is the answer. Mm-hmm. Not some special flavor of sports. To me, it's sport for all, and you are solving that issue. I don't know how do you guys feel about that?
I completely agree with you, and I think that it's often been touted, and I forget what the Nelson Mandela quote is that everybody uses about how inclusive sports is and can really show the world how we can all get along and move forward together. So I think that's important. I think the issue though is that sometimes coaches don't always get that message. And so all the things you're talking about creating an inclusive environment and making sure that it's equitable so that all kids get playing time and all those things that Tony and I talk about in terms of LTAD and how to implement that, so that it's not all about the focus on the product of winning. It's all about the process of developing kids
Right.
to the best of their potential. And in doing so, that's how we work. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. You know, it's really bringing, how should I say this? As you say, Kate, it's making everybody a participant. You know, and as you said earlier, you know, it's like squeezing an orange. You know, ultimately, if you squeeze it hard enough, that juice is going to come out, and that talent is those kids that have an affinity for high performance, talent, and ability. They're going to come out of this process, but it's increasing participation for everybody in every environment, and I think that's where educating people about these frameworks, and in particular, as you say, administrators maybe more so are an important focus than the coach, because they oversee coaches and opportunities for coach education. So there's some very good nuggets that you brought out in your conversation. But yeah, it's giving everybody that opportunity, and I think all of that stuff, for lack of a better term, will take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned our professional certification. We also have an online training for the volunteer league director. So the youth league board member is who it's geared towards. And that one we offer for free to one person from any youth sports organization. You just need to be a volunteer league director to be able to get approved for the free membership. It's about 3 to 5 hours to go through the course. Again, it's all through our website, but it's going to give that volunteer a really good foundation in managing youth sports in a way that's safe and positive for kids. So a lot of these ideas that we're saying, it's important for everybody to know. We want to make sure that there's no excuse for a league not having that training. And then once somebody does complete the course, we provide insurance. So a lot of our memberships come with the insurance benefit, which is valuable for those volunteers. A lot of people don't realize that if you're a volunteer, coach, board member, that you could be personally liable for any actions of the program. And it's like, oh, you didn't really remember seeing that when you signed up to be a league vice president or whatever the position is. But we get named in lawsuits all the time if they see a coach has been trained by, you know how America is, they're so litigious. So it's like, all right, we'll sue everybody. So our benefit of that liability insurance for the individual is something that they don't even know they need, and hopefully won't need, but at least it's another value of going through the course.
Cool. You know, it's interesting you bring that up too, because I know in a lot of the conversations that I have with organizations, Tony will attest to this as well, we're always talking about how there's that need for coaches training. There's a need for administrators to get on board. And yet nobody's saying, well, let's reach out to NAYS because they already have it going on. How do you actually get the outreach to administrators and to coaches to figure out how we can give sports back to the kids? How do you make that happen?
We've been involved with, every state has a Parks and Recreation Association. There's a national as well, NRPA. We are involved with NRPA. Every year we go to the conference, we set up a table, and we try to make contacts with those youth sports administrators in communities around the world. But again, every state also has their own association. So we've partnered with them in various ways. Sometimes we offer a certification course in partnership. So they'll help us with promoting the training to their membership. And again, they're people who work for Parks and Recreation departments all across their state. Delaware, I went to the Delaware Recreation and Park Society conference just before the pandemic. I think everyone there was even like not sure about shaking hands because it was right before. They're like, hey, do we bump elbows instead of shake hands? So yeah, I go to that conference to try to meet new people that aren't aware of NAYS or the whole idea of educating coaches, and that there's all these resources out there. And then through our connections with the recreation professionals, we're able to reach the leagues in their community. So one of the things that we really need to communicate to the person at the recreation department is why everybody who uses your facilities also needs to have these safety protocols in place, or these positive youth development programs in place. So we kind of have used that as our strategy, working through the recreation associations and supporting them. I'll sometimes speak at a conference, and everyone there, that not so promotional, but just on youth sports administration. And then I'll have a booth. So we're trying to make those connections. And again, we've been around for a few decades now. So often when we receive an interest form from a new organization, in the how did you hear about NAYS, it says, I was a member, I am a member, I used to be involved when I was with yada yada county. So it's kind of word of mouth, like everything as well. We don't have any big advertising budget, but we know our audience, the volunteer recreational youth league, and that's who needs to know about us, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kate, so I know we're kind of in the middle of a pandemic, and I think I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say there's some light at the end of the tunnel, or at least maybe we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. In your opinion, and in your role as an administrator for NAYS, do you see the needle as being more optimistic, or do you see it as being more pessimistic as we come out of this pandemic as it relates to youth sport? Or share with us maybe perhaps any optimism or pessimism that you may have as it relates to where we're at right now.
Oh, I got to be optimistic, right? What if I said pessimistic? That would not.
Well, then you give us all the solutions, right?
Now, to me, I feel like families are realizing, what, my kid can't be on the sofa watching TV after school every day, especially when they're doing school virtually. It's like, how do I get my kids active? They want to do it in a way that's safe, but they want their kids playing again. To me, what's great also as the years go on, there's so many pro sports available, programs for kids that weren't available. I don't remember when I was younger, like different new sports, just creative programming for kids. I signed my 3-year-old up for a program that was like a movement, kind of like a movement program, but it was dance, but it was gymnastics. It's like, there's so many community centers that are getting really creative to make sure that they have programming for everybody. Maybe a kid's going to be turned off by the traditional sports when they're younger or when they're older, but just keeping people active in whatever activity that is. I see a lot of hope for that. It's not just the recreation department that's offering programs. I think that a lot of other community organizations have stepped up, especially in the pandemic. If the rec department was shut down, hard from the local government, you can't open, then there's been, groups that are doing meetups to get the kids involved with sports. So they know, there's a need in our community for kids to be active. Let's see what we can do to help out and fill in when, somebody else might not be able to open their facility right now, but we got this field. Let's be creative. So I think people are thinking outside the box a bit. Something else, just not necessarily related to the pandemic, just in recent years, the whole mandates for certain training for coaches has picked up, whether it's at the local level or a state level, or you think about safe sport, something national. The idea that we're all getting more familiar with or comfortable with the idea is that if you're going to be a volunteer coach, you're going to sign up to coach, these are things that you have to be trained on. And they're mostly safety related, but like concussion or the abuse or things like that. Some are sudden cardiac arrest or whatever, but it's a start. It's the idea that I'm going to be educated in my role, and there's a baseline requirement for me to be able to coach. With our program, when a coach signs up to be a member, we have 2 required trainings. The first is called Coaching Youth Sports, and those are all general coaching topics. So a lot of it is safety related. That sometimes is what is the motivating factor for a league to train their coaches. I want my coaches trained in these safety areas. And then we sneak in, or not really sneak in, because it's very, well promoted is that we talk a lot about sportsmanship, the role of the coach, and being a role model. We talk about positive communication with parents, with the officials, all of that. So that is a core part of our course. It's safety, but it's also the right way to coach. And then the second part of our course is sports specific. So we offer 12 different, actually now we have 2 levels for soccer. So we have about 13 different sports specific training courses that we've put together the videos for. And that goes through the fundamentals of the sport, different drills to use during practice to teach those skills. If you're a volunteer coach, kids are signing up to learn soccer, you should be able to teach them the skills of soccer. So that all together, what takes about 3 hours to go through. They must agree to our code of ethics pledge, which is basically a behavior contract. It's like, I'm promising to act a certain way, and I understand how our youth sports programs should be focused, that sort of thing. And then they get their membership. So I mentioned the insurance, we have coaching resources. There's further training courses that they can go complete if they want to dig deeper into a certain subject area, like our bullying prevention training. We have a coaching children with mental health challenges training. We're constantly adding to that. There's a concussion course, sudden cardiac arrest, and those are free. Once a member signs up, they can just add those trainings on. Our initial training is $20 per coach, and that's the full training, their membership card, the insurance, and 1 year of membership. So that's kind of a little bit more about how we work. But as I was saying, the idea that safety is sometimes, call it like the gateway to training. So we know that some people are only interested, oh, let's make sure that, injuries aren't happening, or that the coach knows how to spot signs of sudden cardiac arrest or something like that. And these mandates, these laws that coaches need to do certain courses, that's a good trend. That's a good trend. Some coaches, they say, or at least the league, I'm going to have to ask my coach to do what? But then the coach, they want the help. I mean, coaches they're either going to do this, or they're going to go to Google and say, what do I do for my first practice? How do I put together the practice? They're going to be Googling a lot as they go. At least give them a place to start, right?
Yeah. Learn to coach by YouTube. Well, I don't know how to fix your car using YouTube, or
I know. YouTube is amazing. I'm not hating on YouTube at all, but
you just have to hope you're on the right video to get it where it meets you where you are. And I think that's part of the magic of what you do, Kate, and what NAYS does too, because you follow the Shape America standards for LTAD within their coaching framework as well. So it's not like you just create something, pull it out of thin air and say, here's something for you to do. It actually meets standards. So that when people come to you for that, they know that what they're getting is what they need, and you can meet them where they are. I have just an interesting comment. I wanted to get your take on it, because you've been so good to us for LTAD and integrating that into your programs and letting coaches and administrators become aware of it. I'm wondering if we need to redefine the term safety, because a lot of what I hear from safety is an emergency safety situation, sudden cardiac arrest, a concussion, like something that's like, oh my God, what the heck happened here, rather than the preventive safety. So we always talk about like the sickness and performance end of our wellness continuum. A lot of what's happening in youth sports, I think, is because the kids aren't physically prepared to train. One of my greatest concerns in COVID is that once youth sports open back up, we don't say, oh, great, let's get our kids in physical condition in order to play a sport. We're like, all right, games day after tomorrow, let's go. And so we're opening up kids for lots of injuries. So what are your thoughts on the preventive side of safety and how we could move forward that way?
That's true. That's true. Well, I would say we address injury prevention quite a bit in the sports specific trainings that we offer. Every sport's going to have their own common injuries, and there's a significant part of the training is dedicated to the warm up and the cool down. And then in our coaching youth sports training, we talk about not only identifying injuries, but also preventing injuries. So the proper conditioning, nutrition, hydration. And it's introductory level. I mean, when you're talking about a 3-hour course that includes all these different topics, I mean, we're at least raising the awareness for coaches. They're going to they're going to learn new tips and tactics, but we also link to a lot of other resources. So in their coach's member account, they can get some more information about injury prevention, conditioning, that sort of thing. Another tool that's kind of built into our system, but it can be a really powerful resource. We know that the education up front is important, but we also are trying to see if the coaches are actually taking that information and implementing it into their practices. So we have a coach rating system. It's a way for the coach and their league to get feedback about how the coach is doing. And our previous board members helped us develop the surveys and what questions to ask. However, a lot of them are talking about warm up, proper conditioning. Does my coach know how to teach the skills of the sport? And we're asking parents to complete the survey. So parents are usually watching the practices, not always, but they're there at practice, so they can say, is my coach skipping the warm up? If the coach is ranking low in a certain area, we're talking about warm ups, we'll just go with that. So they were saying, they're not spending enough time on warm ups. The coach is able to see that feedback. The league director is able to see that feedback. The feedback is anonymous to the coach, by the way, so they don't see the parent's name, but they can see, warm-ups is my lowest rating. So we have coaching helpers that are directly linked to each question of the survey. So it's like, here's some tips for a better warm-up or spending more time warming up. It might just be make sure everybody gets to practice on time. You start the warm-up at right when you say you will, that sort of thing. Make sure it's scheduled this many minutes into your practice. So those are things like, yeah, you told that coach during the training that the warm up was important, but are they doing it? And if not, how do we redirect and help them incorporate that? And it goes a long way for injury prevention as well. In all my years of sports, my only injury was in softball, and I was doing karate kicks in the outfield because I was so bored. I sprained my ankle, so I had crutches for a little bit, but that's it. So I guess my coaches did pretty good at the warm-up and conditioning.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not over.
So you might have a little bit more than just sport ADD. Is that what you're telling us?
Maybe.
That's good stuff. Kate, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here and share this. I think it's great information for everybody to hear and learn more about it so that they know there are solutions. We quite often always talk about the problems that are out there without providing people solutions, and you have a lot of really great solutions. So I really thank you for your time. Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, no, thank you, Kate. It's tremendous. Your journey, your story, and your position right now in enabling better and positive coaching and administrator experience relates to youth sport and your insight is so valuable. I'm glad that you took the time, and I appreciate that you took the time today to share with us a little bit of your story. If you could, for everybody else that's going to be listening to this, could you share the NAYS web address, or if somebody was interested in coach education program, or even administrators were interested in what you had to offer, could you share your website?
Of course. Yeah. Our website is NAYS.org. So it's NAYS.org. We try to add free resources on there all the time. We have a resource article section of our website that it's updated multiple times a week. On there, if you're going for the first time, I recommend you take a look at our National Standards for Youth Sports document. Whether you're a parent, coach, or administrator, become aware with those recommended standards for making sure it's a safe playing environment. Also, if you're a youth league director, take a look at our Better Sports for Kids quality program provider designation. What we've done is we pulled out a few of the key standards for youth sports that I just mentioned, and it's a way for you to actually apply and measure up and say, our program checks all these boxes, so we want to earn the designation. If you don't quite meet the boxes, you don't quite meet all the requirements, we help you get there. We have a staff member that works with you, provides resources. Again, these are baseline youth sports requirements for organizations. So those are 2 free resources. I also mentioned the free league director training that you can sign up for if you are a volunteer league director. And again, any of our programs, it's available for people to sign up through the website. Give us a call, 1-800-688-KIDS or NAYS.org. So thanks for the
Right.
opportunity. I love talking to you guys. So
No, it's great. Thank you so much. We appreciate it so much. Great to see you.
Yeah.
good to see you too. Maybe in person later this year. Who knows, right?
Oh,
Maybe next
yeah.
year.
Hopefully.
Maybe next year. All right. Thanks, Rick and Tony.
Hey, thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.